I think it's one of the realities that New Addington as a community has been ignored for many years by the council, and local residents have not been listened to, and there have been lots of grand schemes around Central Parade, lots of grand schemes about lots of housing, etc., all of which is not what local residents have wanted. What I commit to is that I will work with local residents, listen to local residents, consult. We may not always end up where we want to be, but we will have the conversation and everyone will be part of that process. Brick by Brick is in the process of being wound down. So Brick by Brick was a development company set up by the previous council, who they loaned £200 million to that they borrowed, and I think many of us know the fallout of that particular situation. So any Brick by Brick plans that were in the system are no longer in the system. Brick by Brick as a business is not effectively trading and not doing any new development. As I say, my commitment is that I will have that conversation. We'll work through your local councillors and your local groups such as Pathfinders and the Residents Association to make sure that we are hearing what you're saying. But we do have that imperative to sell assets, to pay down that debt in order to get the council back into a financially stable position. But we need to do that working with you, not against you.
When Brick by Brick was in existence, a lot of very small infill sites were not only sold to them very cheaply by the council, but also have planning permission on them. If Brick by Brick Island is now being wound up, where does that planning permission go, or applications and granted go? And obviously, is the land then given back to the council?
You're quite right, the council gave land to Brick by Brick, on odd occasions sold land to Brick by Brick, but generally gave it away. And very few contracts in place, very little information between Brick by Brick and the council. So the reality is that Brick by Brick does hold title deeds to some of these plots, but I'm happy to ask the officers to provide the information of any Brick by Brick transfers in New Addington.
Very quick. Just so I'm clear, in case I've misunderstood, you're saying that Brick by Brick owns some land that the council either gave to them or sold to them, and they still have it, and yet they have £200 million of our money, and they're being wound up, and they're being investigated, but they're going to be able to keep that land. Is that what you're saying? Or sell it on?
The land potentially could be sold on. It's different by them because they're an existing limited company. They exist.
But they've got £200 million of our money.
Yeah.
And they've got land that now they can make money on, while our council tax is going up. I work really hard and I earn a decent salary and I'm struggling. So goodness knows what
if they were to sell, and it may be some of them just come back to the council, but if they were to sell, that money would effectively come back to the council as well.
And how do we know? How do we know that? Are we checking that?
Yeah, because Brick by Brick, any profits or losses come back to the council. It's wholly owned by the council.
So can we have our 200 million back then?
Well, that would be very nice. We'd all like that back, but unfortunately it's wasted, squandered, etc. And you know that's something that we're trying to deal with now. It's an absolute abomination that happened, but we as a council now have to deal with this in a legal way, in a proper way, which wasn't what was happening before. Parcels of land were just being given to Brick by Brick. Brick by Brick would ring up and say, cash flow's a bit short this week, can you send over some money? Money would be sent over, no transactions, no contracts signed. You wouldn't believe how dysfunctional the whole setup was. Yeah, we all are, yeah, and we're trying to now wind that down, reduce that debt as much as we possibly can. So if Brick by Brick were to sell a site, that will come off the debt that they owe, so it will come back to the council one way or another.
Why don't we just take all the land back and sell it to someone else or build houses on it and make the money for us?
I don't know what there are in New Addington, so we need to establish that.
Well, I'm talking about the whole borough.
But because they, rightly or wrongly, they have the title deeds. So they have the title deeds, these pieces of land. So, and some have been sold for £1, some have been given away. So we don't like the way it was done, we don't think it was right, but we've now got to deal with it and try and untangle the mess that it's created.
The public, and with new build sites, that's what the old administration said, and you forgive us for not having much trust in it. And I said this to the old administration, which is people in New Addington. I did a load of canvassing back in 2020, 2019 when Brick was, at this heyday, and a lot of people want houses built in New Addington. They want good quality houses built just in the right places.
New Addington has been overlooked, abused, misused, ignored for many, many years, and that's not how I wish to operate. So we will work with local people. Having said that, we won't always agree. But if we're having the conversations, at least we know why we're doing something or where we're doing something. So we may not always agree, but we will work with you and we'll work together to try and get us the best outcomes for New Addington. So I think accountability is a really big issue and something that's very important to all of us, the residents, to me. We're all residents of Croydon. And we know damage that's been done to Croydon, and we want people to pay for that, essentially, pay for that, what they've done, bringing Croydon to its knees. So we have a number of things that we've done. We have the Penn report, which was an investigation into what went on in that period up to 2020, when we had the first bankruptcy notice. And that's now been published. It wasn't published for 2 or 3 years. It's now published. With hardly any redactions at all. We have the Kroll report, which is investigation into fraud in the Fairfield Halls refurbishment. That has now also come in. So both reports, the Penn report and the Kroll report, have been handed to the Metropolitan Police, and we've asked them to investigate misconduct in public office. Now that's a really high bar for the Metropolitan Police to pursue, but we believe there has been misconduct, and we're asking them very much to follow that through. And that's councillors and officers as well. The former chief exec had quite a large payout, and we're also pursuing the former chief exec to get back as much as we possibly can of the monies that she received, and that's ongoing at the moment. And we've also written to Michael Gove, we've written to select committees to say that basically the law needs to change, the rules need to change, that people in these positions can't do these things and then just resign and walk away, which is what happens currently. And worst of all, people can be in these positions, resign, and go and do the same job in another county. We've handed all the information over. I meet the Borough Commander monthly. It's one of our topics. How are we doing? Where are you at? So it's not being dealt with directly at a local level. It's being dealt with at a higher level. But I think it's really important that we hold those to account who brought our borough to its knees.